Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Be Quran podcast. I'm your host, Ali.
And I'm Fatima. Today we're diving into a topic that challenges one of the most common assumptions in the Muslim world.
We're talking about Sunni Islam, but not in the way it's usually presented. This episode explores the internal theological divisions within the Sunni tradition itself.
From the Hanbalis to the Ash'aris, the Maturidis to the Salafis, we'll be unpacking how this label has come to represent a wide spectrum of beliefs, often in tension with one another.
And we'll also explore what this complexity means for how we understand religious identity, unity, and historical narratives.
Let's get into it. Bismillah.
Now, when most people think about Islam, the first thing that probably comes to mind is that split, right? Sunni and Shia. It seems pretty straightforward, a clear division. But what if that picture isn't quite right? What if it's hiding something? Well, much more complex. Today, we're going deep into something that might surprise you, the incredible, often hidden complexity inside Sunni Islam itself. We're talking about a faith of nearly 2 billion people globally, and our mission here is to explore its roots, its origins, and especially these deep, sometimes kind of startling internal divides within what looks like, one single thing.
Exactly. And the insights we're bringing today, they come from some really rigorous analysis of expert sources. It gives us a unique angle, I think, one that goes way beyond the usual sort of sweeping statements you hear. It's really an invitation for you listening to explore these nuances that honestly often get missed even by people within these communities sometimes. We're going to try and peel back those layers, go beyond the headlines, look at the history, the theology that shaped all this.
Okay, let's get into it then. So, on the surface, being a Sunni Muslim, that definition seems, well, huge. Almost like it could apply to anyone. I mean, fundamentally, every Muslim says they follow the Quran and the Prophet's traditions and practices. So it kind of makes sense that, well, basically any Muslim could fit under that Sunni label.
That's the general idea, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
If you ask pretty much any Muslim today, Shia or Sunni, they'll say, yes, I follow the Quran and the Sunnah. It sounds incredibly simple, but this is where it starts to get really fascinating. What our research shows is that despite that apparent simplicity, Sunni Islam is, well, it's not monolithic at all. Our sources describe it as having a plethora of ideas, many divisions, really different theological views, and multiple distinct legal schools, too. It's more like a tapestry, not just one thread.
And that complexity, it seems to lead to some pretty big misunderstandings. We found this observation that really struck me. Many times we make generalized statements, sweeping statements against each other's heritage, and it comes from just not understanding these internal dynamics properly. So it's like a perception thing. The outside world, maybe even people inside the faith, see this solid block, but it's actually made up of lots and lots of different pieces.
Absolutely. And one of the most striking things in the material we looked at is this idea that for, 1,400 years, the Sunni world has sort of played it very well, that's the phrase used, have managed to present this unified front, effectively masking what's described as a whole wave of different sects within the sect of Sunni Islam. Just pause on that for a second. An apparent unity that for centuries have actually hidden loads of internal differences. It sets us up, and you listening, for a pretty interesting journey as we unpack just how varied it all is.
Yeah, a whole wave of different sects within the sect of Sunni Islam. That phrase really tells you something about how deep this goes. And what really jumped out at me was this idea you could walk into just one mosque somewhere in the Sunni world and find people with completely different worldviews on theology and on law. These aren't small things we're talking about, are they?
No, definitely not small things.
No.
To really get a sense of this, we need to look at some of the main theological schools within Sunni Islam. And honestly, many people, maybe even Muslims themselves, might not have heard of all of them, but they represent some really fundamental differences. So for instance, you've got Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. His followers are the Hanbali school, right? And they have a core text outlining their beliefs called Foundation of the Sunnah.
Okay, Hanbali school.
Then there's Puhamsir al-Maturidi. He founded the Maturidis school, and this is described as one of the most important theological schools in the Sunni world. Lived, just within a couple of hundred years of the Holy Prophet. And what's really interesting is how followers of this theological school are often Hanafi in fiqh. They follow the Hanafi legal school, so it shows how you can kind of mix and match these different streams of thought, right, within this bigger identity.
Precisely. It shows the layers. Then another major one is the Ash'ari school. And the internal debate, well, it's so real that there's actually a book called The Differences Between the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. The title literally asks, what is the difference between an Ash'ari and a Maturidi? That tells you these aren't just tiny academic points. And then you also have the Salafi al-Ahdith trend. It's represented in texts like the Islamic Creed of al-Ahdith by Ibn Taymiyyah, who's a huge figure.
Right, and we shouldn't forget the Tahawiyya Creed. There's the commentary on the Creed of Imam Tahawi by Imam Tahawi himself and Abu Ja'far, another famous Egyptian scholar from around that time. So yeah, we're definitely talking about multiple distinct theological systems that developed over a long period.
And the key thing to grasp here is that these aren't just like minor footnotes in theology books. These are debates about core foundational beliefs. We're talking about discussions about the actual definition of God.
And the position of the Holy Prophet, peace be his family, in relation to his theological position.
Wow, hold on. The definition of God. They debate whether Allah has a body or no. That's huge. That's not just a small philosophical point. It's fundamental to how you even conceive of the divine. And then it branches out into other massive areas like predestination versus free will. That affects everything about responsibility and even practical things like obedience to the ruler of the time.
Exactly, and other big questions too, like whether a prophet commits sins or no, or are prophets infallible or no. These aren't trivial matters. They really shape how you see authority, morality, religious guidance, everything. And here's a critical point that came up in our research, a bit of a critique, really. It suggests that the majority of Shia who are watching this will not have read any of these books. They'd be expected, but also that a huge majority of the Sunni world itself, they've never read their creedal texts. This lack of engagement with their own core texts, it directly fuels the misunderstanding about these deep, complex divisions.
Right. So if most people haven't even read these basic texts outlining their supposed school's beliefs, it's kind of no wonder there's this very generalized, almost simplistic view of what Sunni Islam is, which makes it even more crucial to understand where the name Sunni comes from, because its history is, well, surprisingly complicated. It comes from al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right?
That's the full term, yes. The Sunnah part, that refers to following the Prophet's traditions, his Sunnah, and also specifically the Sunnah of the rightly guided, well-directed successors, meaning the first few caliphs after him. There's a hadith, a saying attributed to the Prophet, in a collection called Sunan Abu Dawud. It's number 43. And in it, the Prophet apparently advises people to stick to his Sunnah and the Sunnah of these rightly guided successors when disputes arise later on.
So it gives you the Sunnah part of the identity. Okay, that makes sense. And the Jama'ah part, what does that mean?
Jama'ah basically means the community, the main body, the majority, the group. And there's another famous hadith, also in the Sunan Abu Dawud, number 4596 this time. It talks about the Ummah, the whole Muslim community, splitting into 73 sects. It says 72 of which will be in the fire, and one in paradise. That is the Jama'ah. Now, this hadith is very often used to claim that the Sunni majority is the Jama'ah, the saved group. It implies a single correct path embodied by the majority. It seems pretty straightforward on the face of it.
It does seem clear-cut. The majority is the saved group.
Simple. But, and this is a huge but, this is where we found a really crucial insight in our research, a genuine aha moment that totally challenges that simple picture. We found this clip. It was a Salafi scholar speaking, and he states quite explicitly that the Maturids and the Ash'aris are definitely not part of al-Sunnah. But that is if al-Sunnah means those who follow the specific creed of the Prophet and his companions, as this scholar understands it. Wow. Okay, hang on. So some of the very people who might use that Jama' hadith to say the majority is saved are also saying that huge chunks of that supposed majority, like the Ashwaris, who are massive in number, are not actually part of al-Sunnah. Why? Because, as this scholar says, they deny certain things, like Allah being upon his throne and above his creation. This isn't just an internal disagreement, then. It's like an internal rejection of entire theological schools that many, many people would consider Sunni.
Precisely. It blows apart the idea of a unified majority holding one single saved creed. And this leads us straight to questioning that common claim, that Sunni Islam was there from day one. Our research points out very clearly that key early figures like Abu Bakr did not call themselves Sunni. Neither Umar or Uthman or Ali. That specific identity label, it just wasn't...
You used like that right at the beginning. Okay, yet some later theologians, like Ibn Kathir, based on interpretations attributed to Ibn Abbas, they looked at a specific verse in the Quran. It's Surah 3, verse 106. It talks about a day when some faces will become white and some faces will become black. And they interpreted the white faces as belonging to the followers of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah. Now, on the surface, that sounds like it could be an early, almost divine stamp of approval on the Sunni identity, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It makes it sound like this group was marked out from early on, even hinted at in the Quran. And this is the really damning detail we found right there in a footnote in Ibn Kathir's own commentary on that verse. The footnote says, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, look, although this statement is really popular, if it isn't actually fabricated, it's among the weakest kinds of narrations. And it says, all of its chains rely on a narrator well known for fabrication. Just think about that. A really popular claim used to bolster this identity is basically called out as potentially fabricated or, at best, extremely weak.
Within its own source material.
That's a massive challenge to the idea of Sunni being this original, clearly defined, divinely endorsed thing from the start. It really shines a light on this huge issue of, well, historical authenticity when it comes to some of these foundational stories. And our sources shared this anecdote that was just, wow, it underscores this point so strongly. Apparently, a scholar was asked where certain narrations came from, how they originated, and he just admitted openly, I fabricate them. Why? To incline people to the sect, basically draw people to his group's side.
Yeah, that admission is it's incredibly telling, isn't it? It really forces you to ask some hard questions about the very foundations of some of these sectarian identities and claims. It suggests that, well, at least in some cases, these identities and belief systems might have been shaped as much by human agendas, maybe politics, as by, pure divine transmission or perfect history.
It really complicates things. So, okay, we started this deep dive thinking Sunni was, well, maybe simple, one half of a clear split. But now after digging into it, honestly, the word itself feels completely baffling, as one source put it. We found this huge range of different theologies, different legal schools, a history that's described as an unbelievable mishmash of reactionary ideas to situations by fallible men. It's not a straight road at all. It's more like a tangled network of paths.
Indeed. And hopefully this exploration has given you, our listener, a much more nuanced picture, something with far more value than you'd get from a typical news headline. We've definitely moved past that simple Shia and Sunni binary to see that the reality within just the Sunni label is incredibly rich, complex, with internal debates, internal differences that are just as profound, really, as any between the major branches.
It really broadens how we might think about religious identity itself.
Definitely. So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to maybe chew on. If this core identity, Sunni, is actually so complex, so historically debated, with major internal schools basically rejecting each other's core beliefs, what does that suggest about how we understand religious identity in general? How these historical narratives get built? How does all this hidden complexity affect unity, understanding within a global faith like Islam? And maybe more personally, what does it invite you to question about your own understanding of religious history and how these big categories we use actually come about?
Thanks for joining us on this podcast episode.
Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep seeking the truth.